greetings to the brightest audience in the library and the internet if you're watching online. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to cold and flu season. Anybody know someone who's been sick? Yeah, I heard Dr. Ryan Cole say that cold and flu season is actually vitamin D deficiency season. You can't get enough vitamin D from the sun if you live north of Oklahoma, so you got to supplement. And Don Slinger, he worked for the DNR for decades, and he'd always get pneumonia, sometimes multiple times in a year. In the last few years, he's been taking zinc and vitamin D, and he hasn't been getting pneumonia. So take that as, you got your money's worth, if nothing else. Yeah, welcome to Creation Science 110. This is the 10th in a series that we've done, and there's a lot of new people here, so we'll just go through what we started last January. It was Creation Science 101. That's where we took a look at two perspectives of the past. One is based on blind chance, and the other one is based on creation. I talked to the students at St. Cloud State about that, and at the community college. It's like, do you think this building got put together by chance? And they say, no, it'd be absurd, right? Well, how much more absurd to think our bodies got put together by chance? And then you start to see their wheels start turning. Okay, and then Creation Science 102, we showed you some good websites where you can get some videos that get you up to speed on a lot of different things really quick. And they're pretty entertaining, some of them. And then Creation Science 103, we took at how old is the Earth? Scientifically and biblically, how old is it? And we also talk about Bible versions. So if anybody's doing this online and you're showing this at your Sunday school, you might want to look at this one before you show it, because we talk about Bible versions. And then Creation Science 104 is evolution, falsified, and frauds. That's Dr. Carl Werner. I got a couple of his books right here. He had 3 books come out last March, and he says he's got 150 cases of fraud in human evolution. And he's going to be speaking Tuesday night on Zoom. You can get the Zoom link at tccsa.tc. That's for Twin Cities Creation Science Association.tc. And you can Zoom it. And we're going to Zoom it into St. Cloud State because we've got a creation club there. And it's going to meet at 7. And if you want to watch it with some students, you can park after 6 for free on 6th Street there. And you can just go into the basement of Atwood, and we're going to be watching that. And then Creation Science 105 was evidence for the flood. But I wanted you to know about what caused the flood first, so I stuck another one in there. What caused the flood? That's the hydroplate theory. It's an incredible theory that makes accurate predictions. It's the best theory out there. When it makes it into the mainstream, the Big Bang's done. It's just getting into the mainstream. It's just so much resistance to it. And then also we have Creation Science 105, that's evidence for the flood. Not the least of which is layers of sedimentary rock all over the world. And Dr. Tim Clary's done a lot of research on that. And then Creation Science 106 is creation, the censored theory. What are we teaching? We're teaching that, biology, everything produces after their kind. Geology, that's where the fossils came from a flood. Anthropology came from the Tower of Babel. That's where you get the different people groups. And we go on that. And then 107 is the creation week. What did God make? Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. How did people get to live to be 900 years old? And we take a look at it and we speculate how that happened. And then Creation Science 108, that's the errors in the textbooks that I've been finding in our school system. And that saga is still going on. Hopefully the taxpayers get upset that there's errors being taught to their students. And then CS 109, Creation Science 109 is NASA blunders. That's where Pastor Kevin Lee, he critiques some NASA videos, and NASA's got egg on their face because their predictions are all wrong, but the hydroplate is all right. And then in the same playlist, you'll see CS 101 instead of Creation Science 101. If it's got a CS in front of it, that means I cut the intro out. There's no introduction at all. We just drive right into the talk. But I think the intro is good, so it gives you ideas on what you can do. Okay, we've spent a few months since we've had a report on the creation battle. Well, where do you think I took that picture? Who knows what that middle flag is? Minnesota, yeah. That's what's on the right there. UN. The UN, yeah. Where are we going to see a UN flag around here? Anybody? St. Cloud State. That's what's flying at St. Cloud State. And speaking of which, I gave a talk there in November called Errors in the Text Science Books, and it was a lot of fun. And when we got done with Q&A, one of the students, can I take a picture with you? It's like, I guess. And then December came around, and December is my favorite time of year because I go to St. Cloud State and I play Christmas carols on my Bluetooth speaker. Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody. You know, Jesus is the reason for the season. Did you get your free gift of eternal life that's been bought and paid for by Jesus Christ on the cross? And so we talk. And this day here, actually, they're setting up for the Winterfest. And so I'm there, and there's people putting up their tents and their bales and everything, and for hours they're setting up for it, and I just keep playing my Christmas carols, you know, God and sinners reconciled. And somebody came and he said, yeah, you can't have that sign stuck in the bales. And so I said, did I break the bales? And he says, no, but you just can't do that. So I lifted it up. Somebody apparently complained. And so I lifted it up and I brought it forward a foot and I put it down so it leaned against the bales. And that's where it sat the rest of the day. And then at 2 o'clock, somebody said, you know, we got an event that's going to be happening here. Can you go somewhere else? And I said, your event starts at 4. I'll be gone at 4. And then somebody came and they said something about, I don't like this religious music, and they were setting up by me. So I just started talking, you know, and not necessarily to them, but I just started talking. It's like, hey, would you ever wonder what's going to happen when your heart stops? Where are you going to be? You going to be excited to meet Jesus or terrified to meet him? And I just kept talking like that. And then when I looked back, my sign was gone. And so I looked around, where'd my sign go? And the guy said, well, we had to set up, we had to move it. And so then they were done setting up, and I was going to put it back where it was. He said, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't put it there. That's government property. You have to hold your signs. And I had another sign like this, forgiveness and redemption. This offer expires when you do. So I'm standing by the Husky just holding it, you know, and it's getting to be about 5 to 4. I'm almost ready to leave. And then 4 security guys come. And they need to talk to me and check my ID. And it's like, well, did I commit a crime? No, you got to check your ID. So 2 guys are checking my, and it's like, you guys know me. I'm on record. We've been through this before. Oh, we still have to check your ID. And so 2 guys are checking the ID, and the other 2 are standing there. And I said, you guys, you know you're not getting all the information here, right? You're getting a blind chance perspective. You know, you're not getting educated. You're getting indoctrinated. And they're agreeing with me. And then at about 20 after 4, I should have been gone. The Winterfest is going on, and it's freezing out. It's like 5 degrees, and it's like, oh man, I'm just freezing. But security left, but there was a student that wanted to talk to me because they'd been to one of my talks. And so I stayed there, and I'm just kind of shivering, but I stayed there because I hate to leave once security talks to me because that sends a bad sign. You know, I can be there. And so then at 4:40, then I took off. You know, I was done, and then I could go. But that's St. Cloud State. If anybody wants to do that, it's a lot of fun if you ever want to do that. We got, again, on Tuesday, we're going to be showing a video there. Then I went to the community college, and I can be there once a month. It used to be I could be there whenever the kiosk was open, and Patty would let me do that, but now they changed the rules. I can be there once a month, so I make sure that I use that once a month. And I had this question, are your science books accurate? And I get them to think, because there's some things on the table there, some errors in the textbooks, and I would show it to them so they'd, you know, have less trust in their textbooks. And then it ended up that most people did not have the confidence. The one that won was maybe. A strong second was no, our science books are not accurate. And then yes, there was some confidence there. And then when I got done with that, I interviewed a student that had gone to St. Cloud State, and she was sick of the woke culture, so now she's going to the community college. And I thought, man, that'd be good to get on tape. Would you want to be interviewed? And she said, sure. And so we lined it up. So after I was done with the kiosk, I went to interview her. Do you like her shirt? Jesus saves. Just bold as can be. And I think we need more people like that. And then I interviewed her, and that's on my YouTube channel too. It's on under the podcasts. And then I'm packing up, and an administrator came up to me and said, we got reports that you're asking people if they want to be interviewed. It's like, well, I didn't ask anybody to be interviewed, you know? And then that doesn't make sense. I don't recall asking anybody. And then she said, well, we got reports. And I said, well, even if I asked if somebody to be interviewed, they could just say no. You know, they said, but no, we can't do that. You can't do that here. And so then I asked her, well, who reported me? Was it a faculty or students? And she got back to me and said it was one faculty member and a vice president. And so then I asked her, well, how many reports were there? And then I also asked, could you please send me, you know, I don't want to break any of their guidelines, so could you please send me the policy which outlines what I can and cannot say and do at the kiosks? Because I've been down this path before about 7 years ago. I was at the kiosk and an administrator came up and said, you can't talk about religion and politics here. But that's a long story. And if you want to hear that story, I tell it here and Get in the Game. That's on my YouTube channel, Get in the Game. At 31:30, you can see what happened, and that. And you got to stand up for your rights. And if you've never seen Get in the Game, I strongly recommend it. You've never seen a talk like this, I guarantee it. We play Pictionary. That's what's happening in the back. We're playing Pictionary. And then, what else happened? Oh, yeah. The reason I met this student is I went to Ox and Friends. Has anybody ever heard of Ox? Dan Oxner, KNSI. On Friday, they do, we're just down over at the Pioneer Place, where they have plays. On Friday at 10 o'clock, he does his show there, and senators and representatives and city council members come and they sit around and they talk about things. And it's a really neat way to see what's happening behind the scenes. And then after that, they go next door and have lunch. So I happen to be at the same table with a senator and a representative and a president of the city council, and I'm listening to them talk. And one of them says, don't make the homeschoolers mad. They're organized. And I thought, why don't they say that about the churches? You know what? Because we're not organized. We're too busy squabbling about things that divide us instead of uniting about what unites us. And so, and we're squabbling about these different man-made doctrines, and yet all of us are hypocritically paying schools to teach kids there's no God. So if we could get the churches to unite at the school and say, let's get the errors out of the textbooks. Let's focus on that. And then maybe they'd say, hey, don't tick off the churches. But we're just too divided. And if anybody has ideas how to unite us around a common goal, I'm very, very interested in that. And if anybody's free on Friday mornings at 10 a.m., not this Friday or the next Friday, but after that, it's really, really a fun time. And I'd love to see that whole thing just full of people, so everybody can see what's happening behind the headlines, because the media doesn't always give us all the behind the scenes. And then there I am. I'm at St. Cloud State with a kiosk. And it's been probably half a dozen years or more since I could be inside at a kiosk. I'm always outside in their free speech zone. Because it used to be the students could check out the kiosk and we could be there all day. Then they changed the rule. You can't be there unless a student's there. And I haven't had a student want to do it until this year, this guy. He wants to have a kiosk. And we just had a great time, just a great time. And there's something about the kiosks in the evening when the pressure of the day is off of the students. They have some of the neatest conversations there. And it was so fun to do it. And that night, somebody came up, and he was he had grown up in a church, 3 times Sunday, Wednesday. He was immersed in the Christian culture and church. And then his dad died right in front of him 3 years ago when he was a junior. And he's doing CPR on him. And he was mad at God. And I can understand it. Been there. And he's mad at God. So then he went way left. And the guy I'm with, he used to be way left. And now he's Christian. And so it's just fascinating listening to those talk. And so if you guys want to be at the kiosk. Then I was on a podcast on Monday, Standing for Truth, and the title, The Emperor Has No Clothes. That's the long version. You guys are just going to get the snippets of it. And then they cut a piece of it because they might get a strike. So I'll make sure that I say that part here so that you can see it, because you won't hear it there.
What does that mean, they might get a strike?
At YouTube, if you say stuff they don't like, if you get 3 strikes, they can take down your channel. And that censorship, I thought it was over with, but apparently they were still concerned about it. Somebody brought up a topic and they got a strike, so they didn't want to risk it. And so even with Kent Hovind's podcast too, they didn't put mine up. But anyhow, you can see this. The Emperor Has No Clothes. And that was 520 views in 50 minutes. So yeah, hopefully they got it. Okay, so since this is, do you know what's in the First Amendment? Typically when I get static about what I'm saying on campus, I'll have this the following day or next time is, do you know what's in the First Amendment? Can anybody here tell me what's in the First Amendment? Gary?
Congress shall make a law respecting an established religion or prohibiting free expression thereof, or speech, or assembly, and that's about it as far as I know.
Yeah, there's press also, and then to petition the government.
Okay.
Yeah, and so,
I can recite the second one.
yeah, I bet you can. And that's there in case our First Amendments get violated.
That's right.
Okay, so, yeah, and the sad thing about that is I've asked that. I go to the Marines, go to the Army doing the chin-ups and stuff, and then I'll ask them, and I always say, thank you for defending. I used to say thank you for serving, but you can serve a tyrant. So I say, thank you for defending our Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic. And then I'll ask them, do they tell you what's in the Constitution? And they say no. It's like, can you tell me what's in the First Amendment? And I've yet to find anybody, military, police, even an elected official, can you tell me what's in the First Amendment? And they can't. And it's like, well, how can you defend what you can't define? So that's in more places where we can try and impact our culture. But at the community college, nobody knew what was in it. And that's a sad commentary. And actually, that's not I didn't even know it until I got my rights infringed on at St. Cloud State a few years ago. And then I figured I'm asking the question, I better know what it is. And then we went to St. Cloud State and asked the same question. We had a lot of fun that day. Do you know what's in the First Amendment? And there was 2 girls, they tag teamed through the whole thing, and they got it. And we were jumping up and down because it's very rare for somebody to get what's in there. And it ended up there was 3 people that could do it. And I asked the girls, what major are you? I figured they were political science, and they were theater. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And they went to a public school. Usually it's homeschoolers that get it. But then I gave them some ideas for theater. Let's start mocking evolution. The emperor has no clothes and stuff like that. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the emperor has no clothes. We're going to look at some deceptions evolutionists have used in the past and continue to use today. We'll look at what's wrong with science, including a fiasco that happens when you have consensus science. That's a really bad thing when they say consensus. If it's consensus, it's not science. And if it's science, it's not consensus. And then what we can do, including humor. And I'll show you 1 or 2 songs from Tim Hawkins. And I encourage you to be skeptical of what I say. Don't just believe it because I say so, but check out what I'm saying to see if it's true. Just like anybody, some teacher, professor, health official, anybody, just check it out to see if it's true. Okay, the emperor has no clothes. This is a saying that's been around for over almost 200 years. And basically it means that the general population is unwilling to recognize or admit the obvious shortcomings of something that's popular or powerful. Well, evolution is very powerful. And professors are afraid to speak out. Even being conservative on campus, that guy who's at the kiosk with me, he says, one of his professors says, hey, don't tell anybody, but I lean right. It's like, well, isn't that sad? You can't tell anybody? Yeah, so it's an interesting situation we have there. And basically it comes from Hans Christian Andersen's 1837 fable, where the emperor just loved fancy clothes. And 2 con men went in there and said, we got the most beautiful clothes in the world, but if you're not intelligent, you can't see it. This is only intelligent people can see this beautiful clothes. And the emperor didn't want them to think he wasn't intelligent, so he played along. And then his officials didn't want to think they were not intelligent, so they played along. And then pretty soon the whole town is playing along with this charade. And the guy's got a parade going through town, and a boy yells out, "The emperor has no clothes!" And then everybody realized that they'd been fooled. And that's what's happening with evolution. That's exactly what's happening. And then the emperor, he even realized he'd been fooled, but he kept on going proudly as ever. And that's what is happening with evolution, because there's so many holes in it. Okay, so we need more people yelling that their emperor has no clothes. But do you think creationists are the majority or the minority in America? Who thinks they're the majority? Who thinks they're the minority? That's where most of the hands are. Yeah, who doesn't know? Okay. Well, this is a Gallup poll from 2019. 40%, the top line, 40% of Americans believe that God made man in his present form less than 10,000 years ago. How about that? They try and make us think we're the fringe. No, we're mainstream. Okay, the middle line there, that's God made man over millions of years. That's your theistic evolution. And then the bottom one is man just got here by blind chance. And I don't call it evolutionists or big bangers. I call them blind chancers. You have a lot of faith in blind chance to get here. Okay, that was in 2019. Okay, they did one last year. Do you think it went up or down? The creationists, do you think we lost ground or do you think we gained ground? You think it went up? And who thinks it went up? Who thinks it went down? Okay, you were right, Sandy. Everyone else was wrong. Yeah, we went down 3. Yeah, the theistic evolutionists went up one, and the blind chancers went up 2. So let's take a look at what's happened in the last 12 years. The creationists have lost 9, and the evolutionists have gained 9. They're steadily increasing, so we've got work to do. You know, this is where the battle is. If you think the world's a mess, it's because there's a battle between God's truth and Satan's lies. And ground zero for that battle is creation versus evolution. Because if science can get rid of God, if government can get rid of God in the science class, well, now who's in charge? And then they can determine the future. So it's not just creationists that are yelling, the emperor has no clothes. It's also evolutionists. Let's listen to this. Richard Lewontin, he's a professor of zoology and biology at Harvard, and he says evolutionists ... have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. What do you think ... was? So I went to get the whole quote. This is the ... Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we ... have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. Boy, they sure changed the context of that quote. They accuse us of quote mining and taking things out of context. Well, what did they just do right there? They left out against common sense, the patent absurdity, the just so stories. And then the quote goes on to say, it is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations. No matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated, moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So material is absolute. Materialism is their God. And they'll do whatever they can, all these constructs, to make sure God doesn't get his foot in the door. And then it goes on to say, if you believe in God, you can believe in anything. You can believe the laws of science. Nature may be ruptured, and miracles may happen. Well, I got a news flash for you. Everybody believes in miracles. I was at St. Cloud State. A student asked, well, during Q&A, he asked, well, how do you think life began? And I said, God made it. And he goes, miracles, miracles. And he starts to storm out of the room. Miracles, you believe in miracles? And I said, hey, everyone believes in miracles. I believe we were created by God, and you believe hydrogen and helium turned into people. They're both miracles. And hydrogen and helium from the Big Bang. So let's take a look at the miracles that everyone believes in, even the blind chancers. Matter from nothing violates the first law of thermodynamics. Order from chaos violates the second law. Life from non-life violates the law of biogenesis. Immaterial ideas from matter is Einstein's gulf. He said that that's a gulf that's unbridgeable. And then consciousness from matter. I've been watching creation stuff for 20 years, and I've never even seen anybody even attempt to explain consciousness from matter. But here's another leading atheist. What does he have to say? This is Thomas Nagel. He got his PhD from Harvard, and he taught at Princeton. And look at the headlines. What has gotten into Thomas Nagel? Leading atheist branded a heretic for daring to question Darwinism. You know, all he did was argue in a new book, the evolutionary view of nature is false, and now grand forces have descended upon him. That's right, he kicked the sacred cow. And now they're all turning on him, calling him a heretic. He argues modern Darwinianism offers a dogmatic system of thought that is intoxicating precisely because it offers the illusion of freeing us from religion. And boy, did he hit the nail on the head there. You know, because I went through the errors in the textbook at the fair one time, and the guy says, well, where are you on homosexual marriage or something like that? And I explained what the Bible said. Well, I'm against it. You know, it had nothing to do with the science. It had everything to do with of lifestyle. And the Bible talks about that in 2 Peter 3. You know, in the last days, scoffers will come walking after their own lusts. And so I meet them at college sometimes. And it's like, well, you just validated the Bible. The Bible said you'd be here. And then, let's see. And I realize that such doubts will strike many people as outrageous. But that is because almost everyone in our secular culture has been browbeaten into regarding the reductive research program about the origin of life as sacrosanct, on the ground that anything else would not be science. Now let's define science. It's observation and testing. You can't observe or test the Big Bang. You can't observe or test molecules turning into man, evolution. And so that was my sign at the community college today. I had, what was it called? Evolution is based on fraud. That's what I had on the sign outside my door, or molecules to man, evolution. And Mr. Pinker, at MIT, a scientist at MIT, also called mind and cosmos the shoddy reasoning of a once great thinker. No, I think he's actually thinking now. He's not swallowing everything they've spoon-fed him. He's questioning it. And he realizes it doesn't work. Because he says, Mind and Cosmos argues the modern scientific story of the origin of life through evolution is ripe for displacement. Yeah, it is. And I heard Dr. Carl Werner, you hear him talk on Tuesday, he's going to say, it's so exciting to live right now because we're seeing the Big Bang fall apart, we're seeing the evolution fall apart, we're seeing the origin of life fall apart. And I'm saying you're seeing the plate tectonics starting to crack, and that's going to fall apart too because they're all the wrong perspective of the past. We have the proper perspective, and it's just a matter of time for it to take over. Okay, so it's ripe for displacement, and it represents a heroic triumph of ideological theory over common sense, which will be seen as laughable in a couple of generations. Well, there's another news flash. It's laughable in this generation. I'm going to show you a Tim Hawkins video, and he just mocks it. It's laughable. Okay, and then he goes on to say that when a chain of reasoning leads us to deny the obvious, we should double-check the chain of reasoning before giving up on the obvious. Because it is obvious this building had a builder. It is obvious a painting had a painter. It is just as obvious that a creation had a creator. And then he goes on to say, it's highly implausible that life as we know it is the result of a sequence of physical accidents together with the mechanism of natural selection. Yeah, I would agree with that. Highly implausible. He says materialism is, as Nagel suggests, self-evidently absurd. And I agree. It's absurd. Even Darwin said it was absurd to think that the eye came about by natural selection. He said that was absurd. Well, if it's absurd to do it once, evolutionists believe it happened 40 different times. And how much more absurd is that? So I agree with Darwin on that point. But then he said, don't hold this against the theory. But anyhow. Okay, Mind and Cosmos can be seen as an extended paraphrase of Orwell's famous insult. One has to belong to the intelligentsia to believe things like that. No ordinary man could be such a fool. Yeah, it takes a lot of education to believe that molecules turn into man. And no ordinary man would believe that. Because I would teach Sunday school, for ages 3 to 1st grade. And they'd say, there's some people, they don't believe in God, and they think, how would they think people you got here? And they said, from your mommy and daddy, where'd your mommy and daddy come from? From ape-like ancestors, and they'd laugh. You know where they came from? From reptile-like animals, like snakes and stuff. And you know where they came from? Amphibious, and then fish, and ponds come and nowhere. And they would just be laughing their head off. And they'd say, do it again, do it again. But they can see how absurd it is, and we kind of just, we're being browbeaten. We're like believing the emperor has clothes when he really hasn't. Okay, and also, speaking of 1984, the line that still just pops out at me is, those who control the past control the future. And those who control the present control the past. And we've seen that. Evolutionists are controlling the past by eliminating God, so there's no God in the future. The ultimate authority there would be the government. And then those who control the present control the past. Okay, and that's why the people were getting censored. And I've seen creationists get censored for decades. And then during COVID, we saw doctors get censored who were saving people with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And it just shows who's in charge. And now recently, it's people who criticize Israel. Just ask Candace Owens about that. And so I always like to see who's being censored. That shows who's in charge. And typically, it's that saying, beware of one hand clapping. There's two sides to every story, right? But if you only hear one side over and over again, it's probably the side with the truth is being censored by those who can do it. And they can't defeat it publicly, so they just have to keep that from getting into the mainstream conversation. Okay, the positive mission Nagel undertakes in Mind and Cosmos is to outline cautiously a possible third way between theism and materialism, given that the first is unacceptable. You can't allow God to get a divine foot in the door. You just can't allow that. And the second is untenable. It doesn't work. Copying errors do not turn a skateboard into a space shuttle. Similarly, copying errors do not turn a single living cell into everything that's ever lived. Okay? And he says, fortunately, materialism is never translated into life as it is lived. And he goes, like husbands and wives and parents, you know, you don't treat your kids like pond scum. Okay, chemicals. Materialists never put their money where, well, almost all materialists, there's an exception, almost never put their money where their mouth is. Nobody thinks of his daughter as just molecules in motion. A materialist who lived his life according to his professed convictions, understanding himself to have no moral agency at all, seeing his friends and enemies and family as genetically determined robots, wouldn't be just a materialist, he'd be a psychopath. And I'll introduce you to one. Anybody ever heard of Jeffrey Dahmer? He killed people and ate people. And this is what he said. If a person doesn't think there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. I always believed the theory of evolution as truth, that we just came from the slime. When we died, you know, that was it. There was nothing. And so he actually did live it out, but most people don't. Okay, and so that's what can happen. And Jason Lyle will give these talks, and sometimes people will accuse him of lying. And he'll say, I don't think I'm lying. But from your perspective, what's wrong with lying? Especially if it can help my survival ability. You know? And so he plays in their ball game, and it's very uncomfortable for him to think like that. Here's another quote. Harry Lipson, head of the physics department at the University of Manchester. In fact, evolution became, in a sense, a scientific religion. Almost all scientists have accepted it, and many are prepared to bend their observations to fit in with it. Who thinks scientists would bend their observations? Any hands? Who thinks, oh, look at all those hands, who thinks that they're beyond reproach? They would never do that. Nobody thinks that. Okay, yeah, they're going to bend their observations, and I can prove it. You know, this is Lucy's hip. Lucy's hip is in the middle. A chimp hip is on the left. A human hip is on the right. Who thinks it looks like a chimp hip? Who thinks it looks like a human hip? Okay, all right. So this is what they actually did. In search of human origins. Listen to what he says. The perfect fit is an illusion. It's a chimp's. But if Lucy's a chimp, it's not an illusion.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bone seem to flare out like a chimp's.
So the perfect fit is a chimp. But you can't get that. I was at the kiosk one time years ago, and the anthropology department was beside me. And I said, they cut Lucy's hip to turn it from a chimp to a human. And she said, no, they didn't. I said, yeah, they did. She said, no, they didn't. I said, I got it on my computer. You want to see it? No, don't want to see it. Don't confuse me with the facts. I want to believe the emperor has clothes, apparently.
But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
So not only did they bend their observation, they cut it and they twisted it. And is that an isolated case? No, it's rampant. And this is Piltdown Man. In 1912, they found it. They said, this is an ape man. It's our ape-like ancestor. And it was in the textbooks for 40-some years. And then in the 1950s, they finally got their hands on it, and they looked at it, and they said, no, it's a human skull and an orangutan jaw and teeth. Yeah, and so this just happens over and over again. We did a talk on all of that, Creation Science 104. I think you'd enjoy that. That's Dr. Carl Werner's work, and that's actually what he's going to be talking about on Tuesday night at 7. And we'll give you that link at the end. But they found this tooth, Nebraska man. They said it was the Nebraska man, this one tooth, and they could draw a person, the body, the man and his wife and his tools. And then it turns out later that it was a pig tooth. And in between there, they had the Scopes monkey trial. Yeah, 100 years ago this year. And they used that tooth to make the creationists look foolish. And who are we to question the experts? But then 2 years after the trial, they said, oh, our bad, it was a pig. So they made a huge thing. And Carl Werner says, that's not fraud, that's a mistake. What is fraud is when they lied about when they found the tooth. They found it 5 years earlier, and they said they found it last year. And then they didn't show the pig jaw that they found 8 years before that. And they said, be careful, these teeth look like human teeth. And so they withheld that from the public. So those are 2 cases of fraud in that one example. And the guy in charge of it, or the guy in charge of the debate, the expert in it, this Henry Fairfield Osborne, do you think he retired in shame? No, he got promoted. Or he got honored. Dr. Osborne was elected president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the highest honor that U.S. and Canadian scientists can give a colleague. And it appeared on the cover of Time magazine. So he made a big blunder, but it helped evolution, so he moved ahead. Is that an isolated case? No. Dr. Dart did the same thing. He said, I found this skull. It's an ape-man skull, or an ape-child skull. And they said, no, it's a chimpanzee skull. And his colleagues rebuked him. Did he retire in shame or just kind of go back? No, he got promoted. So there's people out there that want to promote people who push evolution forward even though it's not factually accurate. And what's happening here in St. Cloud? Test scores show St. Cloud District 742 performing far below state average. And so basically 1 in 4 students in St. Cloud can do math or science at that state standard. And only 1 in 3 can read at that standard. It's bad scores getting worse. Well, this is how we compare to the other area schools. St. Cloud's way at the bottom. Sartell's way at the top. Who do you think should get to be superintendent of the year? Sartell or St. Cloud?
St. Cloud.
St. Cloud got it. St. Cloud, we got failing grades getting worse, and we got the superintendent of the year. It just makes no sense. So apparently you can fail forward. And I showed, and I'll go through this real quickly. These are Haeckel's fake drawings. I pointed them out to the curriculum director, and they've been wrong a lot. I've talked about this in a lot in my talk, so I'll just breeze over it. But it says, although Haeckel confessed to drawing from memory and was convicted of fraud at the University of Vienna, this is over 100 years ago, folks, and the drawings still persist. Why are they still in our textbooks? And I was at the fair, and one time a guy said, well, they should update the textbooks. And I said, these are 2024 textbooks. They don't get much newer than this. But why are they still in there? This is Eugenie Scott in 2007. And she said 10 or 15 years ago, back then, so before the turn of the century, in the 90s, they knew that these drawings were not reliable. But listen to why it's still in there in 2024.
And actually, it's been known for 10 or 15 years that Haeckel's embryos are not to be relied upon. The reason why the diagrams are reproduced is because they're easily available. There's no copyright on them. It's an easy way to illustrate a point.
Yeah, to illustrate a point. Well, if you have to lie to illustrate a point, I think change your point. Get a point that you can support with truth. And I pointed it out to the curriculum director. She got back and said, well, we're just teaching the state standard. So I asked, well, what standard? It says we're only 1.6% different from chimpanzees. I gave her PubMed, which says it's wrong. I gave her Nature, which says that our Y chromosome is horrendously different. And that's basically 57% different. It's more different than it is alike. And she didn't get back to me, but the superintendent did. And she said that we are in the process of reviewing your concern and our response with the publisher so they can clean up the mess and the bad error. No, we're going to contact it with our district's law firm. Why don't you just contact the publisher for free and get the textbooks cleaned up? They contact a law firm. It doesn't make any sense. So I went to the school board meeting. I asked the school board if they would contact the publishers, and they got back to me and said that the superintendent let us know that you've been working on it with the curriculum director. Now think that through. If that was accurate, I wouldn't have had to go to the school board meeting now, would have I? And so I went back again and again, and they just swept it under the rug. We consider it resolved, but the errors are still there as far as I know. I don't have access to the books anymore. And I went back again and I showed them. I told them, your textbooks say that life started in water. This is verbatim from your video. The chemicals, the raw ingredients that make up life were constantly sloshing around, bumping into each other, and combining into new chemistry. Over millions of years, that process can lead to living organisms. No, it can't, according to a PhD chemist. And I played him this video. And I asked him, what degree does your curriculum director have? What degree does your science lead have? Do they have a PhD in chemistry? If they don't, they should listen to this and then tell their science teachers to not teach kids that life started in water.
We're taught that chemical evolution started in the oceans, but you say that's the last place you'd expect to look. Why?
Well, okay, to build up a big molecule called a polymer from many little molecules called monomers, for instance, proteins from amino acids and DNA or RNA from the nucleotide building blocks, every step of the way, every combination spits out a water molecule. They call that condensation. But if you already have water molecules dissolving these things, then the water would come back and actually break that bond apart. It's called hydrolysis. So if you try to do this in water, it's the hydrolysis, the breaking apart that would happen and not the forming. In fact, chemists who want to make proteins or DNA or RNA, they exclude water as much as they can. They even have water-absorbing chemicals to draw out the water. So a primordial ocean is the last place I'd expect to find these polymers forming.
Yeah, it can't happen in water, and yet that's what they're teaching the kids. It's declarative facts, and it's not true. And so then NASA even admitted it. Bob Enyart got this question asked of Mary Wojtek on this international stage in Germany. He said, shouldn't this be more acknowledged that water's a problem for the origin of life? And she says, well, I think it is acknowledged, and it is a problem. But you can listen to this. NASA admits water is a problem for the origin of life. Go into rsr.org/NASA-water and listen to her try to tap dance her way out of it, but the moderator brought her back. And you can see more in depth. I'm just hitting the high points right now. You can see this on my YouTube channel. That's the talk I gave at St. Cloud State. You can see my my school board comments, thanks to Gary. He videos them for me, and he goes, they're never going to believe you. They're never going to change. And I says, I'm not doing it for them. I just want everybody else to see what they're not doing. So if anybody wants to be on the school board, man, they don't want accurate textbooks, and they got failing grades, that should be a pretty easy platform to run on. We're going to, the millions of years of mutations have given rise to both species from a common ancestor. So they put it all on the millions of years. Evolution is a unifying theme in biology by most scientists. Well, if that's the case, how come there's this third way of evolution? Other mechanisms are essential for a comprehensive understanding of evolutionary processes. And then they want alternative ideas of the evolutionary process. Why do you need alternative ideas? Well, it's because the ones you have don't work. And this is an evolutionist. So again, everybody's screaming the emperor has no clothes, and yet he just keeps going along. A much better way is ICR's continuous environmental tracking, and you can see more of that on the other talks. I'm just going to zoom over this stuff so we can get to the part that got censored. Dinosaurs are supposed to be millions of years old, 65 millions of years old, but they found blood cells in there. And they told her, do you realize you've got blood cells in the bone? And she said, I just got goosebumps, because everyone knows these things don't last for 65 million years. Everyone knows that. And when Schweitzer showed Horner the slide, she recalls, Jack said, prove to me they're not red blood cells. Because she's showing the emperor has no clothes, and it's like, don't do that, don't do that. And then Bob Enyart, he offered Jack $20,000 to carbon date that bone, because if it's got carbon C14 in it, it's got to be less than 100,000 years old. And you can listen to this conversation. I won't play it for sake of time. But basically, Jack says, well, we wouldn't expect to find C14 in there because it's too old. And Bob says, yeah, I know, but we wouldn't expect to find blood cells in there now either, would we? Yeah, but other people did do it, and they found dates between 22,000 and 38,000. Which is a far cry from 65 million, but they wouldn't let them show it at the conference. The abstract was removed by the conference website by two chairmen because they could not accept the findings. They were showing the emperor has no clothes, and they wouldn't allow it. And you can see that on decontaminated dinosaur bones and carbon-14 dated on YouTube, so you got to educate yourself. My education didn't start until I was almost 40, and I saw the creation model. And then I began to think for myself. I saw both sides, and I came to my own conclusion. And so I tell kids at college, or at the VOTEC, or the community college, it's like, if you want to get educated, it ain't going to happen in class. They're only giving you a blind chance perspective. You got to see both sides if you want to think. They find carbon-14 in fossils and diamonds. So those things aren't millions of years or billions of years old. And then the Big Bang states that the universe formed during a single event in which all matter and energy suddenly expanded from an extremely small point. They used to say it was about the size of the period on the end, at the end of the page. You know, that's what they used to say. And it's gotten even smaller. I mean, that's a crowded dot just with a period. I mean, all of Minnesota, this whole building, the whole Earth, all of the sun, and all of the galaxies in that little dot. Okay, that takes a lot of imagination. Okay, but it goes on to say this point called singularity is thought to have been infinitesimal. So it's thought. We just moved out of science. This is a belief system. Science is observation and testing. Thought is a fuzzy word. Infinitely dense and infinitely hot. It is thought to have been smaller than a single atom made of pure energy. Yeah, you can imagine it if you want, but it doesn't work. The Big Bang theory of the universe is refuted by the Webb telescope observations. And it's such a laughing stock that Jason Lyle, he says, your predictions of what you're going to find from that telescope are going to be wrong. And once you realize you're wrong, you're going to say the galaxies formed much sooner than expected. And he was right both times. Okay, so it's a laughing stock. It's going to fall apart, according to Danny Faulkner. And I don't have time to go into it all, but galaxies that should not exist. The universe is expanding faster than science can explain, sending physics into a crises mode. Yeah, it's falling apart. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if you tied your theology to the Big Bang, like some places, what are you going to do? Well, then they'll blame the Christians for the Big Bang, you know. But anyhow, okay, and that's in conflict. And this is another, all scientists work for Walt Brown. I won't play it, but it's just whenever they find stuff from the comets and asteroids, this one they found amino acids, DNA, RNA, and minerals formed in salt water. Exactly what you'd expect from the hydroplate. Exactly. It's just perfect. But she's a victim of the government school system, so she thinks that it was some water planet from billions of years ago. She won't even consider that it came from Earth. But if we can get this out there, I think we can make a difference. Okay, whoops, yeah, we won't. we skipped her, sorry about that. Okay, so what's wrong with science? It's got the wrong perspective of the past, a blind chance perspective, which is absurd. Okay, and it's also taught as dogma. You can't question it. It's consensus. Don't go against the consensus. And my favorite one of that is Ignaz Semmelweis. He figured out, hey, after doing an autopsy, wash your hands. Pretty radical thinking back then. It went against the consensus, and he was ridiculed and rejected. This is 1847. Wash your hands after doing an autopsy. And even when his hospital was having less deaths than the other ones, he had like less than 1%, and they were having like 14 and 15%, they still ridiculed and rejected him. So even if all the evidence points to the consensus being wrong, a lot of times they won't change. And this is what I want you to hear. Yeah, you can listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson. And this is a famous scientist. And listen to him. It's really sad, really.
This is world-renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, a scientist explaining why you and everybody out there shouldn't ask questions. Watch.
There's a list of top-ranking medical professionals. Just take a look.
I'm talking about, excuse me,
Dr. Peter McCullough. No, I want to go through what happened
consensus.
Here. This is the problem with the consensus.
The consensus.
Okay,
medical professional.
I want you to
because the medical is so huge. I can find you an astrophysicist who is sure we've been visited by aliens. That's not the
problem
consensus.
was the scientific method died here, and this is the point I want to make. It died a death here, and I need you to help me save it because Dr. Peter McCullough is the leading cardiologist.
I don't care if titles don't matter here.
But what should matter?
They don't matter.
What
matters
should matter?
Is the consensus. I'm not interested in medical pedigree. I'm interested in medical consensus, in scientific consensus.
Scientists that were on the ground, that were dealing with patients, were being censored, were being shut down. Their YouTube channels were being shut down. Their LinkedIn's were being shut down.
Because the individual scientist does not matter.
So let me get this straight. The scientist doesn't want you to follow the scientific method because it goes against the scientific consensus, even if the consensus was wrong. And it's not just the vaccines. The consensus did the same thing with COVID. Remember when Fauci and company said COVID came from a wet market? That lab leak theory went against the fake consensus. If you mentioned it, you got censored and smeared as a crazy person. Hey, kook, the coronavirus came from a bat. Definitely not the coronavirus lab around the corner.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that time, but there was a lot of stuff that was deemed misinformation that turned out to be right. Anybody got sent to Facebook jail because of stuff that was right? I had to get a burner account so I could keep out of jail. But I used to cut it before they talked about the Wuhan stuff. But now it's not controversial now. This is what the government determined. This is a report from December 2nd of 2024. This is on the Congressional Committee for Oversight. I don't know if you heard this. This is the final report on COVID, and it's COVID most likely emerged from a laboratory in Wuhan, and a lab-related incident involving gain-of-function research is most likely the origin of COVID-19. They didn't mention that we were funding that research. And the 6 feet apart social distancing recommendation, which shut down schools and small businesses across the country, was arbitrary and not based on science. And by the way, this is the part that got cut from that other thing. And so there was no conclusive evidence that masks effectively protected Americans from COVID-19. Andrew Cuomo's March 25th order, which forced nursing homes to accept COVID-19 positive patients, was medical malpractice. And a lot of people died, so that death count got up there and it got everybody afraid. And it's really sad what happened there. Public officials often spread misinformation. This is their report, not mine. Okay, contrary to what was promised, the COVID-19 vaccine did not stop the spread or transmission of the virus. And vaccine mandates were not supported by science and caused more harm than good. Public health officials engaged in a coordinated effort to ignore natural immunity. Vaccine injury report system failed to properly inform American publics about vaccine injuries. And I'm just going through this so we can see what science by consensus leads to. It's a train wreck. We can't do science by consensus anymore. And then the science never justified prolonged school closures. Children were unlikely to contribute to the spread of COVID-19 or suffer severe illnesses. And yet they put that COVID vaccine on the childhood vaccine recommended schedule. The recommended childhood vaccine schedule. And Peter McCullough, Del Bigtree, brought up in that conversation there, he's the most published heart surgeon in the world. And he goes, why did they put COVID-19 for children? They weren't being affected at all by it. And so then he said, well, if they put that on for bizarre reasons, I wonder if they put anything else on for bizarre reasons. And he's come to the conclusion is, hey, stop all the shots. Let's get proper safety studies done. And hopefully Bobby Kennedy will get the safety studies done. Okay. Oh, and he just got confirmed today. I don't know if you heard that, but he was confirmed 52-48. And Del Bigtree, he's the guy who was on that video. I was watching the High Wire today, and he had to cut out early because he was going to go to the Oval Office and watch him get sworn in. So it's pretty interesting to see what they can do, get the truth out there. Schools remained closed longer than necessary because the American Federation of Teachers' political interference. HHS engaged in a multi-year campaign of delay, confusion, and non-responsiveness in an attempt to obstruct the Select Committee's investigation. This is EcoHealth's president, Dr. Peter Daszak. He was accused of doctoring documents before releasing them to the public. Further, Dr. Daszak provided false statements to Congress. And that EcoHealth, that's how Wuhan was getting funded. And so it'll be interesting to see if he does any time. And then Fauci's senior advisor, David Morris, likely lied to Congress on multiple occasions and unlawfully deleted federal COVID-19 records. And then Fauci gets a preemptive pardon. I was like, well, what is that for? But they were talking about that on the High Wire, and there's 17 attorneys general from states that are going after him for breaking state laws, or they want to, so we'll see what happens there. And again, I say that because we don't live in a bubble. We're in this world, and there's a lot of things happening in the world, and we need to think critically all over the place, and that means we need good information. And I don't know if you knew about this, but the World Government Summit is going on right now at the United Arab Emirates. And I find out about this. This is a YouTube channel called Nations Conspire. And I find out a lot of stuff that I don't find out anywhere else. It's Nations Conspire. And this one is just a few days ago. The World Government Summit is discussing how every country will connect as one with AI. So you read Revelation, it's like you see those dominoes being put into place right now. The technology and we got rid of the penny. You know, we could go to a cashless society, which means they can turn it off if you step out of line. And yeah, we might not pay, a universal income, no income tax, yeah, but you're going to have a carbon tax. You can only eat so much, but anyhow. Okay, what's wrong with science? Also, it's corrupt. There's corruption there. And don't take my word for it. Listen to Dr. Jerry Bergman. He's got 9 degrees, and listen to what he has to say.
The problem of fraud in society, it's a serious, deeply rooted problem that affects no small number of contemporary scientific research studies, especially in the field of evolution. And I should add, especially in the field of medicine. Of all places where forgery should not be is in medicine. Why? I don't know if any of you have worked for medical school, but I have. And a lot of professors there, they don't get paid by the medical school. They get grants. And their salary comes from the grant. Well, if you don't get good results, your grant's not renewed. And so it's a matter of, can you feed your family, or hey, I will just tweak the results a little bit. So there's a strong incentive today for forgery in science. And so therefore there's an epidemic of forgery in science, and in medicine especially.
And you can see more of that on TCCSA's YouTube channel. I made some highlights of him. And I just love it when he gets off script. He's got so many experiences. Oh my goodness. And he's one of those persecuted guys, you know. They won't allow a creationist. And he grew up an atheist. You know, he knew Madeline Marie O'Hare. Listen to his highlights. It's just fascinating. Oh yeah, and I was sitting at that table with the senator, the representative, city council, and they were saying, you know what, people are just bombarded with information. It's like sitting in front of a train, and you just can't process anything. And I said, hey, I got a question that'll stop the train. And I asked him, who paid the biggest criminal fine in U.S. history? Does anybody know? Gary?
Pfizer, was it?
Pfizer. There you go. I asked this at the fair one year, and only 13 people knew it out of 242. Pfizer paid it. And it's like, well, why don't we know that? Well, it's because they advertise so much. Brought to you by Pfizer. Everything's in the news. They aren't going to bite the hand that feeds them. And so what did they do? $2.3 billion for fraudulent marketing, according to the Department of Justice, I believe. And then this is Helmut Welke. For sake of time, I won't play it, but he gave a talk at TCCSA too, and he says there's fraud in genetics, there's fraud in climate change, and he quotes the Cornwallis Alliance, and you can listen to that. I think it's about at 57 or so. He starts talking about the fraud in climate alarmism. And then also the high wire. You know, I was lucky to find this high wire back in COVID, so that I didn't get the pharma-funded media or government stories. This was just purely, and you saw Dell talking to the other guy, but now they're starting to look into chemtrails. And that was just a big conspiracy theory. And now they're asking for FOIA requests from the government. And they're starting to sue, and they're starting to get some of this stuff. This is Harvard, you know, reversing climate change with geoengineering. Well, what's that? Well, that's man-made technology used to alter and manipulate Earth's climate system. Well, how do you do that? Well, you can remove the carbon dioxide, and Helmut Welke says, man, are you trying to kill us? Are you trying to kill the trees? I mean, plants need carbon dioxide, and we're actually dangerously low. We're at 400. This came up at the kiosk that one evening, and he said, I've never heard a good argument for about climate alarmism. And it's like, well, I got one. So we started talking, and I asked him, how much carbon-14 is in the atmosphere? And he didn't know. Does anybody here know? You know, if we could get to 1% carbon, would that be a good thing? Okay, no, it's at 0.004. It's just a real small part. And so, but we're actually, if we get down to the 0.002 something, everything dies. Plants die, that means we die. And what if we're going into another mini ice age and we want a warmer planet? And yeah, so there's a lot of things, but that's carbon dioxide. But the geoengineering technology could help combat the climate crises. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to fix our climate because they got a blind chance perspective of the past. God made a robust climate. If it gets too warm, it's going to get more clouds. It's going to cool off. You know, he's got to check into that. But it says they could pump aerosols into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight, thus cooling the Earth. And so you see them up there, and you see these fuzzy skies at times. It's like, who gave them the right to do that? And so anyhow, that's coming into the forefront now. You know, Dell was working on vaccines way back then, probably 9 years ago, and now that's being in the mainstream talking. And 6 months ago, they had somebody talking about fluoride and the harm it causes, and they won a court case. And now there's places in Florida that are taking it out of the water. So now maybe this chemtrail stuff, maybe that'll get into the mainstream in 6 months to a year, maybe, hopefully. This is a letter that the EPA sent them. Thank you for your letter of October 16, 2023, concerning the releasing of sulfur dioxide from balloons into the air. The release of sulfur dioxide or other sulfur components into the stratosphere is a form of stratospheric aerosol injection, often referred to as geoengineering. So the EPA knows about it, and they're allowing it. And then they got a FOIA request from a military spraying thing, and look at those lines down at the bottom. Let's see. You see those circles? They don't get any chemicals. That's where eagle nests are. But everybody else gets more. And it's just fascinating. I never miss a high wire. It comes out every Thursday, and it's just fascinating. Okay, and so what we need more people yelling, the emperor has no clothes. We need a vast number of people to get informed and inform others. You can do that with clubs, church things, fair things, school board, whatever. And let's start using humor. This is Tim Hawkins. You can hear this on YouTube. It's called Atheist Kids Songs, because there's atheist churches. So we thought, well, what do the atheist churches sing to the kids? And here you go.
Like no one loves the little children, all the children of the world. No one hears you when you cry, no one hears your lullaby. No one loves the little children of the world. Reason why we exist, but there's no reason why. Reason why we exist, but there's no reason why. Evolution, this I know, for Charles Darwin told me so. Accidentally alive, if you're weak, you won't survive. That's the logic, right? That's what they're saying.
That is what they're saying. Survival of the fittest means elimination of the unfit, and that's what Hitler was doing. And so it's kind of refreshing to see it starting to be mocked. I can't wait for Brad Stein and Jim Brewer. Oh man, can they mock things? If they ever get a hold of this, man, it's game over. But there's so much resistance to it because I think the creation points to the Creator who may have revealed himself in the Bible, and they don't want that. And so this is his poke at that.
I am an A-T, I am an A-T-H-E-I-S-T, and I have N-O-T-H-I-N-G to give me hope and certainty, and when I D-I-E, I will be A-L-O-N-E. Hey!
Yeah, and so that's why we have conversations like that at St. Cloud State. You know, I was talking to a guy who says, I just die, I go to the grave. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. What did we do tonight? We looked at the deceptions of evolutionists. We looked how they bend their observations and use false statements and use fuzzy words, and they allow the errors to stay in the textbooks. And then what's wrong with science? We got the wrong perspective of the past, a blind chance perspective, and that's just false prediction after false prediction. You know, vestigial organs, junk DNA. It's always these. It holds science back. And then the consensus, which is not science. We showed a train wreck of when that gets in control, and looked at some corruption. Okay. And then we showed you what you can do. And if you want to see Carl Werner speak on Tuesday, you get the link at tccsa.tc. You're going to have to, it's kind of a, or just email me. If you can't find it, email me. And you can watch other things on their YouTube channel, and it's broken into topics: biology, geology, anthropology, history, and it goes on. And if you want a creation vacation, get away for a break, this will be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, April 25th to 27th. Who is it? Andy McIntosh is coming in from England to speak. And Richard Dawkins takes shots at him by name. So it's like, well, man, any enemy of Richard Dawkins is going to be a friend of mine. So this thing, it's lodging, meals, and everything for $99. Is great, and it's just beautiful. And if you want a more extravagant one, there's a Grand Canyon trip that's going on June 19 to 22nd, where they do all the work: the hotels, the getting to and from the airport, the everything, the driving. It's all up on them, and that's $950. And let's see, I think if you want more details than what I skimmed over, you can see that Emperor Has No Clothes. All right, so we did it. We got all the way through. Does anybody have any questions?
Remember, you don't have to give anybody your identification if you're on government property, unless you're committing a crime and you're not doing anything suspicious.
Yeah.
You're bluffing.
Well, yeah. I've had that conversation with security before, and he says, if you don't, we're going to throw you out for trespassing. And then I asked for what his name was, and he won't give me his name. First the guy said, you know what? And I said, did I commit a crime? And then finally they said, do you want to talk to my supervisor? And I said, yeah, I'd love to talk to your supervisor.
Good for you.
And then he comes and he says, well, if you don't show us, we're going to trespass you. And I said, okay, I'll show it to you. And then I asked, well, what's your name? And he wouldn't tell me. And so then I emailed that situation to our advisor, who's a constitutional attorney who loves the freedom of speech. And ever since then, I don't know what she did, but they've left me alone. They don't even bring out the free speech sign anymore. You know, and it used to be you'd go in and sign in for the free speech zone, and they'd say, well, who sent you, or whatever, and I'd put Jesus. And after a few times like that, she said, you can't put Jesus. And so then I'd put Mark 16:15, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. But yeah, that's St. Cloud State. I think we're making headway. on Tuesday after a creation meeting, there's a Bible study going in Atwood, and that's typically going every Tuesday. So people are opening up their Bible there. So that's a good thing. We might be able to make some headway.
What time is the High Wire program on that you watch?
I watch it. It's at 1 o'clock on Thursdays, but it's recorded. So I gave this talk over at the community college. I didn't get home till 3 or 4. And so, oh, it's High Wire. And even when I'm on the road speaking, I'll stay up late to see what it is. And the background about that is the guy who does it, you saw him talking to the scientist, that's Del Bigtree, and he won an Emmy with the doctors on CBS, so he's at the top of his profession. And then he did a documentary called Vaxxed about a CDC whistleblower in the MMR vaccine, so he burned his bridge at CBS because all their advertisers are pharma, and so he started the High Wire. And basically, he started ICANN first, Informed Consent Action Network, where they sue the government. It's like, if we win a lawsuit and nobody hears about it, what's the deal? And so they started this to get the information out. And he got thrown off of YouTube when he was talking about hydroxychloroquine. And YouTube said you got 2,000 to 5,000 viewers per show. And when they all had to go to his website, it was over 200,000, and now it's over 6 million. And his thing is, hey, we may not be first, but we're going to be right. He wants to win in a court of law before he reports it. And he was actually Bobby Kennedy's media man. So he was working with Bobby Kennedy, and then they joined forces with Trump. And now he's been able to suggest people that would be good in the FDA and the CDC. And basically, it's the censored people. And that's what should happen. America had more deaths than any other country in the world. If this was the NFL, they'd all be fired, and they'd bring in the people who were saving people. And that's kind of what just happened. The other people are going to get thrown out. It was a train wreck what they did, and it comes out now. And so, yeah, the High Wire, I haven't missed it in 5 years. A real show, like Christmas or Thanksgiving, it might be a fluff show. But they got the Jackson report, and he's going into the polio epidemic, and how that seemed to follow when they were spraying arsenic and lead on plants to get rid of the caterpillars. And then like Guillain-Barré syndrome now, that would have been called polio before. They just renamed things as part of reducing it. Yeah, but the very first High Wire show that I saw was Battle of Agendas, Trump versus Fauci, because Trump said something about chloroquine could help. And then Fauci boots him off the podium and says, oh, it hasn't been tested. And then 2 people use chloroquine and die, okay? And that's plastered all over the newspaper. 2 people do what Trump said and die. And then Del Bigtree shows all these headlines, and then he goes, but what they're not showing you is 6 paragraphs down, you find out they didn't have COVID, and they didn't take medicinal chloroquine. They used industrial strength chloroquine that's used for cleaning aquariums. And it was at that moment, 5 years ago, I realized I can't believe anything the media says. And so I just keep going back to the High Wire, and that gives me good information. Also, Nations Conspire. And if you want to kind of see the other side, Mark Dice, he's a pretty good one too, about showing what's happening on the other side. So again, there's a lot of information out there. Just get it all and come to your own conclusion. And watch out if everybody's agreeing on something. That's a red flag for me. There's 2 sides to every story. Yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to get informed. And at the fair, when I'm talking to people, it's especially with that Pfizer thing, it's like, well, we need a source of information that's not funded by Pfizer. I want that, and you want that, and your friends want that, and that's the High Wire. I think if we can get a big group of people watching the High Wire every week, it's going to be a lot harder for them to scare us into.
So do they cover the news?
They will, yeah. It's mainly they cut their teeth on the vaccine thing. And Del said, hey, if we watch this COVID vaccine, nobody's going to want it. It's like watching sausage being made. Nobody wants to eat it after they see what's in it. And that's kind of what's happened. A lot of people are very leery of it. And then he goes and he shows the vaccine inserts. These are some of the things that could happen when you get a vaccine. Like myocarditis and encephalitis and all this stuff. It's on the list, and people aren't being shown that.
And I heard recently, too, that almost every COVID vaccine contains aborted baby cells.
Yeah, it's either contained or it was developed with aborted babies. Yep. Yeah, and I have censored talks. There was a pastor in Wisconsin. He said, hey, can you do a creation science revival for us? And I said, how about we do a Creation Sunday, 3 talks, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll do a revival of truth. So Monday, we'll take a look behind the vaccine curtain before COVID, and then Tuesday, we'll look at the COVID corruption, and then Wednesday, we'll look at what the tyrants of the world, globalists, have in store for us. And to his credit, he said, yeah, let's do that. And you can see those talks on Rumble. It's called Revival of Truth. And yeah, we need all the information. And the lawyer for the high wire, his name's Aaron Siri, he had the vaccine guru on a deposition because there was a divorce. The dad wanted to vaccinate the kid, the mom didn't, and so they called this guy in to be the expert witness, so why he could, why they should be vaccinated. And so then this Aaron Siri had 8 hours with them, and it was like mental chess. It's like, man, this guy's brilliant. And then he did ask him, how many aborted babies have you used in your research? And he said 2. And so then he gives him this study. And are you familiar with this study? And he's an author of it. And you want to go to page such and such, how many aborted babies did you use? It's like 74. It's like you used 74 on this one. Do you know how many you used in your career? And he said, I have no idea. But it's fascinating, and I knew vaccines would be an issue, so I watched it and I took notes and all that stuff. So I just took some of those clips and put them in behind the vaccine curtain. That's Dr. Stanley Plotkin. They got the Plotkin gavel. He's got the Vaccine Bible. And then Catherine Edwards, she's a co-author on it. And he had both of them under depositions. And it's very fascinating just to see the clips. She comes unglued. There was one time, it starts out, and he's asking Plotkin, have you ever gotten money from Pfizer? Yeah, well, how much? You ever gotten money from Sanofi or J&J? Yeah, well, how much? And then he goes, and he'll ask him about, what's this company? And so, are you a CEO are you on the board member of this vaccine company? Da-da-da-da-da. And that's for profit. And he just laid all this financial conflict of interest out in the open. And the guy finally says, I resent this type of questioning. And he goes, you're implying that finances have swayed my judgment. And he goes, no, we're not doing that. We're not suggesting. You're suggesting that. But it's just hilarious. Mental chess, if you got time, Aaron Siri is brilliant, just brilliant. And now he's got a lawsuit against for the Hep B virus, or Hep B vaccine that they give babies on the first day of life. And it's a sexually transmitted disease or drug thing. And it just makes no sense to give it on the first day. And their safety study was only like 4 or 5 days. And so he's working to get that off the schedule. And they also work to get religious exemptions, because that's an issue, aborted babies being used in it. And there was 5 states that you didn't have a religious exemption. And then they had it in, where was it, West Virginia or somewhere. They had the law going all the way through so that people could have it. And then the governor vetoed it. Yeah, but the lawyer who was in charge of getting it all the way through, he ran for governor. And he won, so he made an executive order. So now West Virginia has that. And now the next one, it's Maine, Connecticut, New York, and California. Those are the ones that they're working on. Free the 4. It used to be free the 5, and now it's free the 4. But a lot of that stuff, that's what the high wire hits.
Like I said, trust but verify. Double check your information.
Indeed, that makes sense.
That was Reagan that said that, didn't he? President Reagan?
He said the government's not the solution to our problems, the government is the problem.
No, he was dealing with the Russians. He said trust but verify.
And he said the most frightening words in the English language is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help.
Had that right.
Yeah, that was Reagan. So thank you, all you first-timers. Let's give those guys a hand. Thank you, Tiffany and Gary and Glenn. Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I hope it was worth your while. And I do appreciate the thumbs up at the technical college. Yeah, that is so refreshing, because that doesn't always happen.